It's only an analyst position, but is this a new era for Iowa football, for Iowa offensive football? Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. This is our Hawkeyes live edition that we present each and every Tuesday, 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 where it counts. Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm, of course, is the guy that makes this go for. We're pushing 200 shows. We're at 187. Please pull up, leave those comments and questions. We're going to run down the Hawkeyes' latest coaching edition and look at the quarterback position. Corey, how you doing?
All right. I'm all right. It's rainy here in central Iowa. It's going to turn. We got blizzard warnings out tonight, so it's going to turn from 50 degrees and thunderstorming and rain to overnight 60-mile-per-hour winds and 2 to 4 inches of snow. So I know it's probably a little different than where you're at, but hey, Hawkeye fans are excited. It's been a weird few months. I just think the way Iowa football ended its season left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. And of course, we've been previewing spring ball. They've had a couple of decent additions. Obviously, the Mark Gronowski news at the top, but they've had some decent additions in the portal. I've heard a lot of good things about Bryce Hawthorne out of South Dakota State. I'll be publishing a video one of these days about that news, or at least the scuttlebutt there. And then, of course, Mark Gronowski as he comes off injury. But this guy from Wake Forest, it sounds like he spent some time at Bowling Green at K-State. That's a good name for that role. It's the type of name, and I know you want to provide some insight on Wake Forest that a lot of Hawkeye fans probably aren't familiar with, but it's a type of guy that I would expect the higher Power 4 programs in the country to be seeking the services of right now. I mean, these are the typical, I don't know. Obviously, 2021 was record-setting. I'm sure we'll talk about that year with Sam Hartman, et cetera. But he did some impressive things at all three of those schools, and it'll be interesting. I'm assuming this is all Tim Lester. I mean, there are connections here between Tim and the new guy, Warren, and so I'm assuming this is a Tim Lester hire. Kudos to him for somehow landing him, and now you got to wonder. You know what my next thought is, Mark? My next thought is this. What is when you texted me about this news initially? So we know the qualifications. I know you're going to run through them, but I'll tell you where my mind's at right now. They brought John Budmeyer in. Budmeyer had been the OC at Colorado State. Not a good one, by the way. The numbers didn't suggest he was a good one. He did have some success as a quarterbacks coach at Wisconsin. They bring him in as an analyst. He then later gets promoted to wide receivers coach. Warren Ruggiero, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, has a substantially better, it's not even in the same stratosphere as Budmeyer. They're bringing him in to be an analyst. So a couple thoughts. A, big win there. But B, is this a one-year stepping stone for a young coach who's got a lot of good years in front of him? My guess is that it is. Like I say, I'm surprised that he's there now. I also wonder if, I don't know the contractual things here with Ruggiero. I'll be honest, I've been tied up a lot of the day, and so I've not dug as deep as I'm sure some media people have. But assuming he's locked in for a year, which I don't think we can assume that, if John Budmeyer struggles this year, or hey, maybe they promote him to a wide receivers coach next season, I have a hard time believing somebody with his type of a resume will be on the market for that. I would think. I'm surprised he doesn't have, and maybe he did, but he turned him down. But I'm surprised he's not going to coach somewhere else as the offensive coordinator, or at the very least, a quarterback coaching role at a major school. So I don't know what it means. Maybe this means that Kirk is going to, I see the comment in the Chev Yoda in the chat. Lester to head coach, Ruggiero to OC when Kirk hangs it up at the end of the year. So there's going to be some theories tossed around. But on face value, this is a really good hire.
Yeah, sometimes the timing just doesn't work out, especially in the coaching circuit, where maybe he got a few offers or a few contacts, and he could have pursued some things, or maybe he did pursue some things and just he finished second a few times, or maybe a few things just didn't line up, or it wasn't a good fit for him. And here we are now nearing spring football, and there aren't many coaching vacancies across the country. Most of those are just because somebody has found an NFL spot here and there, like, of course, Liddell Betts, just here in the last 10 days or so. And so my initial reaction was I saw the name and I instantly went to, okay, he's the Wake Forest offensive coordinator. Therefore, he has done some good things. I knew that he had been there for a while. I did not realize until we looked into it, 2014. I know that this isn't uncommon to Iowa football fans, but this is fairly uncommon across the nation for a guy to stick around with a head coach for 11 seasons. That's a long tenure as a coordinator. I think that speaks well of him. I'm not saying it from a derogatory standpoint that he could have done better and moved on. I say it more from the standpoint of the consistency and the dedication to the program. And Dave Clawson, who stepped down following this season, was certainly considered one of the better coaches in college football, despite, being at a disadvantage at Wake Forest. But my goodness, I initially thought, yes, longevity. And I thought the production at Wake Forest when Sam Hartman was there in particular. Anyone who's a stats nerd, do two things. Go to Wake Forest like circa 2015. That will look much like the Iowa offense. You will see if you go from box score to box score through like 2015, 16, you will see early in his tenure, you will see them struggling to score points and to produce yardage. Obviously, coaches need players. And once they got hold of Sam Hartman in particular, they did have a quarterback. I'll be able to come up with his name in a minute. He produced. So it wasn't just Sam Hartman. The quarterback prior to Hartman, his name's escaping me right now. He had a breakout season under, we're going to go with your pronunciation, Ruggiero. And he had he was like a 3-year starter there. And his numbers it's ridiculous. I'm going to look him up here in a second. His numbers went from like Deacon Hill-esque to like he's firing like 32 touchdowns his final season there before Hartman. Then Hartman steps in. My goodness, I said this a number of times, Corey, in talking about Wake Forest football when it came up, which of course, even on the national scene, we're not talking Wake Forest much. However, this team was so prolific and they did go to an ACC championship game in 2021 that you have to talk about them to a certain extent. That I don't know that there was a team in college football during about a 3-year stretch that relied on passing game more than anything else on the field and basically would have been a 3 or 4 win team without a prolific quarterback. But let's understand, not prolific to the degree that he had the talent to be some first rounder in the NFL. Sam Hartman is not that guy. It was more about scheme, timing, concepts, and basically Sam Hartman and 3 receivers got them 11 wins and got them 8 wins in another season. This just impresses me as a hire, as you just stated.
I thought he was younger than this. I'm just looking this up. He's 58. So I'm a little surprised by that. I think he kind of looks like a young 58 to me, but regardless, for people that don't understand how this works, and this was the case when John Budmeyer jumped aboard as well, although again, he was not coming from a high profile job, but this allows him freedom to go somewhere else and not enter into a contract with a program that he's not excited about. So yeah, Iowa's got a spot open as the running backs coach. That's why I was kind of joking about him filling the wide receiving coach duties, because like I say, I would think he's already had opportunities to be a coordinator somewhere. And apparently he either doesn't want that or he's getting, I don't know what the contractual, what kind of contract he was under at Wake Forest, assuming he's still getting paid. So it's kind of like the Budmeyer thing. Remember, he was getting paid during the year that he coached, analyzed at Iowa. Mark, does that make sense? Am I making sense on that? So he may not have the freedom to go get another job unless he wants to sacrifice whatever salary he had left at Wake Forest. I do question, this happens everywhere. It happened with Paul Chryst last year. Remember, Iowa offered Paul Chryst the job, and he sat on it, and eventually turned it down, ended up being an analyst at Texas and leading the college football playoff. And I don't think Paul Chryst has gotten hired anywhere, has he?
I've not heard. I don't think so.
So that's my point. Like this, I mean, he could end up sitting at Iowa for a while on this job. I wonder, because it happens everywhere, it doesn't worry me, but you do wonder, like, how much motivation does a guy like this, who has a really good extensive resume, Mark, how much motivation does he really have to give it his all? I mean, I don't know. It's Tim Lester's offense. If Iowa really looks good this year, yeah, it's a good reflection on him, but he's got his resume built. That's why I say if he somehow, without knowing exactly what his job agreement entails, whether he's locked into a 1-year contract, I don't believe he is, because if it's built anywhere like the John Budmeyer situation, he's not getting paid. And that's part of why he's accepting this role, to stay in the coaching circle, continue to be someone who's on the national scale, but continue to get paid by Wake is my assumption there. But he could probably leave at any point. So it's rare that you're going to have offensive coordinating jobs opening up in the summer or early fall. There's always a possibility of that happening. We saw what happened with Pat Fitzgerald Northwestern, August, as their season was starting. So there's always an opportunity for a late change, and maybe he ends up going somewhere, but it's likely they get him for 25. And, I'm sure he's going to add in some different concepts. I know Lester and he went up against one another when Lester was at Syracuse as the offensive coordinator, and Ruggiero was at Wake Forest. It's funny how things come full circle, because Iowa's done a nice job, I don't want to say poaching South Dakota State, because their head coach, Jimmy Rogers, took the Wazoo job. But the whole reason why Iowa was able to nab Hawthorne, and I shouldn't say the whole reason for Gronowski, because they were interested in him, but even before Jimmy Rogers left, but they get these guys that enter the portal after their head coach left for Wazoo. And the whole reason he left for Wazoo is because Wazoo's coach left for Wake Forest, which is why Ruggiero doesn't have a job, and now he's at Iowa. This is funny how it goes full circle in every part of the country, right? So, yeah, I mean, I'm excited about it, just to see what it does to the passing game at the very least. And my question is, how much does he fit in with Gronowski's arm? My guess is he fits in really well, because I think my understanding is he ran a lot of RPO at Wake. And you brought up Sam Hartman. I'd be curious to compare Sam Hartman, and obviously he was prolific in 21. I'm not trying to compare apples to apples here, but his style of play, he's about the same size as a Gronowski, probably more mobile than Mark is. Who knows how Mark's going to look coming off what?
I would go Gronowski, right? Isn't he supposed to be pretty mobile?
He's mobile, but I mean, I could be wrong on that. Maybe they're about the same mobility wise.
Gronowski.
Gronowski's more mobile than Cade, but Gronowski's not. Brandon Sullivan is more mobile than Gronowski.
Sam Hartman's not mobile.
All right. Well, I haven't watched enough Sam Hartman football.
I'll go Gronowski on that comparison. Look at the prior quarterback. So, Cheviota, sorry that I did not check out your comment. You nailed it on John Wolford. I've said the guy's name 1,000 times in my life. Couldn't come up with it. Look at this senior season. Like, he just explodes. 29 touchdowns, 6 picks, 64%.
Yeah, I mean, so how much credit do you get? I mean, did something else? That'd be my question, right? He was there since 2014. Why was there such suckish quarterback play for so long? You said, well, they finally got players, but
yeah, they finally got players.
There's other factors at play, right? There's other factors, other hires at play. He was the offensive coordinator during that time. Who was Wake Forest's head coach during that stretch? It's the same guy.
Dave Clawson.
Clawson, yeah. That's right. So Dave Clawson is an offensive mind or a defensive mind?
It's a good question. I've only known him as a head coach. I don't know what his background is.
Let's see here. Looks like Dave Clawson was a defensive guy. So although he was an OC at Tennessee, but he played DB in college himself. So Yeah, I don't know. He looks like he's coached both sides of the ball, primarily offense, though. So I guess my question is, how much of that offense was Wake Forest? Wake Forest was Dave Clawson? How much of it was this guy? That's to make it put it very simply for people
Sure.
that
Yeah, and we do see that all over the place where if a particular head coach is known for something and the offensive or defensive coordinator, it's usually the offensive coordinator is just kind of a fill-in, just kind of a support to what is really the head coach's offense. Now, I don't believe that to be the case here, but there's Sam Hartman.
now so
Forget the
they
Notre
broke
Dame year.
records. They broke
Look at his
records in
last 2 years,
21.
39, 38 touchdown passes.
So they broke records in 31, but not in 20, or excuse me, in 21, but not in 22. That's interesting. But I did see that they were the only ACC team to average 30 plus points for like 6 straight seasons, from like 17 to 22, until they lost Hartman. The only ACC team that includes, Miami, Clemson, Florida State.
Yeah.
North
And again,
North Carolina.
he did it with two different quarterbacks here.
North Carolina's had some good offenses.
Yes.
They haven't played a lick of defense, but they could score points. So that's an impressive stat. The ACC is a good offensive league. Would you agree?
Yes. There were a couple of years here very recently that I thought it was the best quarterback league in America.
Yeah, I could see that. So I'm anxious to see how, like I say, what kind of concepts he brings in and what Kirk is comfortable with. And then obviously the second, you like that, don't you? The second part of this is, who does Iowa hire as running backs coach? I've heard nothing. Again, there might be people who are, I don't know. Trying to sneak into Kirk's office when he goes to the bathroom to check his phone to see who he's talking to. I'm not that invested in it. I'll just wait and hear, when it happens. But I'll be interested to see how the concepts kind of mesh together. No pun intended, because I think you're going to see more mesh concepts. And you like that? You like that too, didn't you, Mark?
I like that too. I did not. I failed to bring up the mesh concept because I don't know where that originated either. I don't know if that's a Ruggiero special that he schemed up, but that's been what Wake Forest has been known for.
Yeah, so this is your show too. You need to you're more of an authority on this guy than I am. So for fans that would like to know, if Iowa was getting a Ruggiero offense, what would it look like? What did it look like under Sam Hartman? They obviously ran the ball well because they also controlled the clock.
Yes. An authority in comparison, possibly not an authority on Wake Forest football. The slow mesh play. It's basically, it's contingent on your defensive line or your offensive line to hold blocks for one thing, because it's slow developing. It's involving the quarterback to read the end and the movement by the defensive end and what he's going to do, whether he keeps it or not. And obviously they passed off of it more than other teams do, became more of a passing offense.
Which Iowa will likely still run the ball more, even without Caleb Johnson. But that's intriguing. And I go right back to my guess is, you correct me if I'm wrong, not an offensive coordinator, not an offensive mind, but I would guess having maybe some slithery speedsters as wideouts in that type of an approach, that type of an offense, is even more valuable. So I think about guys like Sam Phillips. Jacob Gill's not small, but he's certainly not big. Seth Anderson, I'd say the same thing about. I feel like I'm missing somebody. Obviously, they've got guys like Terrell Washington Jr. that are super intriguing because of their flexibility, being able to kind of move them in and out of the backfield and do some different things, maybe like they could have done with Tyrone Tracy had there been a different guy at the helm coaching that offense. But and then, the other thing about it is I do wonder with Mark Gronowski. So assuming Mark Gronowski's good to go, and I think everybody wants to assume that until I see the green light and see him on the field, it makes me nervous. I'll just be very blunt about that. But assuming he's good to go by basically late spring, early summer, he's working with the team, of course, informally throughout the summer. getting summer conditioning in, then we start fall camp. I'll be curious to see how he fits in with a different running back, obviously, than Caleb Johnson. Caleb Johnson was as dominant of a back at Iowa as we've seen. And by the way, did not test well at the combine. We can talk about that. But I'll just be interested. There's so many things that are going to be different and yet the same about this offense this year, with the change in personnel at quarterback, running back, receiver, and then second year under Lester, different analyst who is in some ways, compared to what Iowa's had in the past with offensive analysts, John Budmeyer, extremely innovative. So I just think we may be underestimating how much different this will look in year two, and that's exciting. And they may need to look. I don't know what the defense is going to look like. There's a lot of questions on that. They lost a lot of players that were contributors on defense. Now I think they're going to be fine because I have confidence in Phil Parker, and I brought up Caleb Johnson at the combine. They didn't really have anybody test all that. Their combine numbers. Now I'm not a combine guy. I'm not really a draft guy either, but I did graze somebody's basically notes from Iowa's combine guys. I mean, again, I don't know what past Iowa guys have tested out. Maybe they all test low, but these were some horrific numbers. Let's call a spade and be objective, Mark. These were horrific numbers. But we can talk about it.
I was unaware of how Iowa tested, so you're bringing new information to me. I have been the guy up until a couple of years ago that I would turn on the combine day one, whenever it started, 9 a.m. in the morning. Boom, my TV's going on at 8:59, and I'm watching the combine start to finish. Barring other better things to do, but basically the combine's going to be on at my house the whole time.
Okay, so
I didn't turn on the combine. I know very little about what happened at the combine.
Yeah, I don't want to sit there and watch the complete. That just seems almost torturous to me. So I'm glad
I used to love it.
I'm glad that you love that, but I'd rather run the combine in Madden than watch it in real life. So here's what I'll say. Let me read you. This is credit to Tyler Tashman, Des Moines Register. Tyler, great guy, doing a great job on the beat, so to speak. But this is how Iowa tested out. And should I just share my screen here, Mark?
Sure.
I'm giving due credit to Tyler for tabulating this and piecing it all together. So if you want to check this out, I don't often plug other people's work except our friends over at Hawkeye Report, but Tyler did a good job with this. So certainly go over there. But here are some of the results. And as you can see, he lays this out. Basically, the prospect grades it's a sliding scale of how this is how they're rated. 8 is a perfect prospect, 7.3 to 0.5, perennial All-Pro, projected as a perennial All-Pro, 7 to 7.1, potential Pro Bowl talent, 6.7 to 6.9, year one starter. Then you get down 6.5, 6.6, a boom or bust potential, 6.4, 6.49, will become a good starter within a couple of years. 6.3 to 6.39 will eventually be a plus starter. 6.2 to 6.29 will eventually be an average starter, and so forth. So Ashton Jeanty earned a 7.15. He's the highest player in the entire draft class. So I'm not saying he's going to end up being a better player than will be Caleb Johnson. However, I think it's hard to deny that. Let's get off of it. You don't want to talk about women's basketball. I think it's hard to deny the athleticism and the numbers there. So for context, he scored a 7.15. Then you start looking at Iowa guys. Caleb Johnson had a 6.23. Now let's go back up to the sliding scale here. 6.23 is lower half of this. He's the highest rated guy that tested at Iowa, but will eventually be an average starter eventually. So if we're talking about a guy who's going to get drafted in the first 2 rounds, I don't think, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, they're not drafting running backs that are projected to eventually be an average starter.
No.
Right? So that tells me he's not just on combine results. This is just combine results. But if we're just looking at combine results, that tells me he is not a top 2, maybe even 3 round running back. Lance Zierlein, who's written NFL stuff for a long time, analyst at NFL.com. Comment. These were excellent comments, by the way. I love that Tyler includes Lance Zierlein, because I thought he described Caleb's game beautifully. He's built like a bruiser. His style is more finesse, prefers to win with tempo and decisiveness, keeps his runs on time, on track, while allowing blockers to do their job. So he's developed patience. He's not overly aggressive, has the same size and strength to break tackles and grab extra yards at the finish, runs with below average creativity and cut quickness, but has consistent linear play speed to pop chunk runs. He can catch, but his 3-down value takes a hit because of his struggles in pass pro. His traits and running style make him a projectable fit in a 2-back system with the upside to take on a bigger chunk down the road. He ran a 4.57, good for 19th out of 24 running backs tested.
Doesn't that surprise you?
That's not good.
I thought he was faster than that.
That is not good. Well, here's the deal. He's faster. I think he'd win more 60-yard dashes.
Yes, I was just going to say. Takes a while to get going.
Yes, exactly right. And the 40-yard dash, we view that as a big part of the combine, right? Especially for skill guys, running backs. So, I mean, you look at that doesn't make me think positively about Caleb Johnson's draft stock based on combine performance, correct?
No, he has some nice things to say about his game, though, on the field on game day.
Yeah, but I also think he's spot on with how he describes this. I've been getting knocked for 3 years because I've talked about he looks the part, but he doesn't play as physical as he looks. Now, he got better doing that this year, but there's still, I mean, a guy like Lance Zierlein, who I respect, it still sees that might be a bit of a hole. And you're also playing against a lot bigger people and a lot more athletic bodies in the NFL. So there's that. He's the highest performer at the combine. Now think about that. Sebastian Castro, projected grade under 6, 5.95. We thought maybe he'd leave early last year. He's projected to be an average backup or special teamer. Average backup. That might, again, maybe these other Iowa guys have been graded similarly, but that's unbelievable to me.
Based on combine results. My one question, and you can't answer this, would be if we take that formula of all those, which is very specific. It's not like there's 3 categories like great,
right,
good, and awful.
Right, exactly.
Like it's very specific. Like, how accurate has that been in the past?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I don't know if you go through past Iowa draft classes where all these guys rated really low from combine results. That's possible. I wouldn't think so given I wouldn't think so given the strength and conditioning program through much of Kirk Ferentz's tenure. But at the same time, sometimes guys play better than they test. I don't know. I can tell you, look at his 40-yard dash time. It was the worst out of 15 safeties. He was dead last. 4.59, dead last. His vertical jump, 30.5, dead last. I'm not trying to be hard on the guy. I'm just saying, Mark, this is the second highest rated kid that from Iowa that went to the combine, and he was the worst safety graded. That's profound. Again, maybe it won't be. And listen, if we're wrong on this, if this is not a true indication of draftability, then these guys will be drafted lower, and some of these guys won't be drafted. If it's not that much of an indicator, if history tells a different story, then this won't affect things. He'll still be. I think Castro will be a 4 to 5 round pick. Caleb will be a 2nd to 3rd round pick. But I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not in the business, but those numbers, again, go back up to Caleb Johnson. Really bad as far as 40-yard dash. 19 out of 24 as far as his ranking. Sebastian Castro, 15 out of 15 on both of those tests. Luke Lachey, prospect grade of 5.94, also an average backup, projected as be an average backup or special teamer. Likely to be fighting for a role as a tight end 3 or 4. Has NFL size, but he needs to prove he can sustain consistently sustain as a run blocker in order to become a trustworthy 3-down player. Again, that is not a typical Iowa tight end. We're used to Iowa tight ends, whether Michigan wants to claim them or not. Eric All, Sam Laporta, even Noah Fant, T.J. Hawkinson, George Kittle, guys going to the league and playing almost immediately. I mean, Sam Laporta is a perfect example of that. But they're not fighting for tight end. That is like Henry Krieger Coble stuff and Sean Byer stuff for the Broncos. I'm serious. I mean, I hope that's not true. I'm just telling you. So, anyways, that's where he's at. Then you look at his numbers. Ooh, good vertical jump. How much that means as a tight end, I don't know. As far as being a red zone target, that's probably a good metric. But 3-cone drill, 5th out of 8 tight ends tested. 20-yard shuttle, 9th out of 9 tight ends tested. Those grades don't seem great, do they, Mark?
No, they
Okay.
don't.
Then we'll go down to Jamari Harris, 5'9"
We did not get a 40 time. I'm sorry, we did not get a 40 time on Laporta or on Lachey.
No, and I don't know that he ran the 40.
Okay.
Let me look just real quick if I can see.
He probably didn't if they didn't
He did
post
not
it
run
there.
the 40. Did not run the 40.
I will say one thing before you continue, Corey, that in watching the NFL Network's presentation of the combine, they typically show, and they just basically repeat the same graphic every year. I don't know if they did this year, that will show the best wide receivers in the NFL and where they slotted on their 40 times. They weren't the worst. So you don't want to finish 15th out of 15 or whatever else we saw there that was low down the ranks. But they weren't the best either. Like the very best wide receivers in the NFL and some of the great wide receivers over the last 15 years or so have typically been like average in regards to speed in the 40.
Well, okay. Well, he didn't run the 40. But again, those other numbers, vertical jump, solid. Sell yourself on that. But the rest of the numbers are pretty average at best. Jamari Harris, graded as a 5.92, also projected to be an average backup or special teamer. Talked about how he majored in zone coverages at Iowa, has good instinctive eyes and ball skills. When healthy, he's been a quality starter, but his age and perception, he's a zone-only corner, could work against him. Vertical jump was good for him as well, 6th out of 22 cornerbacks. So those two guys tested well in that regard. Broad jump, 16th out of 21 cornerbacks. That's obviously not a good rating unless there's just a lot of really athletic corners in this class. Y.A. Black, if I believe, don't quote me on this, we'll go back. This one was really, really, really scary. Okay, really scary, Mark. And I'm not surprised by this, but here's a guy who, he may end up making his money in the league just being he's going to be a space clogger, but he got a prospect grade of 5.86. But listen to Lance Zierlein's analysis. Massive nose tackle with high-end traits. Black's run plugging can run hot and cold as he fails to anchor with flat feet sunk deep into the ground when attacked on an angle. He can separate and neutralize the block to messy the gap when his pad level is right and he's one-on-one. Black lacks snap quickness and range, so he's much more a space eater than a playmaker. Size and traits will be coveted. Black lacks rush and is a little inconsistent at controlling the point. He might have a ceiling as a rotational big man. Listen to these numbers, though, Mark. Wow. 40-yard dash. Why did he run the 40-yard dash? 19th out of 19 defensive tackles, 5.39. Vertical, 26th out of 28. 25.5. 3-cone drill, 7.63 seconds, 5th out of 8. Those are some really not favorable numbers, right? I mean, and maybe it's, I know DT can defensive tackle can kind of be a different type of position because there's some guys that are more of your interior pass rushers. He's a space clogger. I'm sure Vince Wilfork didn't test well at the combine back in his day, but nevertheless, I would almost like to not go to the combine. Maybe that's stupid. Maybe that's the wrong attitude. I'm sure if you go to the combine, it helps you. And then Jay Higgins, wow. This might have been the most surprising one of all. Prospect grade, 5.68, candidate for bottom of roster or practice squad. That's his projection. That's Jay Higgins' projection.
Yeah.
He's racked up tackles at Iowa and awards, built like a downhill running back, delivers power behind his pads like one. Instincts feed his gaudy production, but a lack of length and twitch lead him to getting stuck on blocks when he's not playing downhill. He lacks change of direction and quickness and isn't fast enough to capture outside runners. Higgins shouldn't be asked to handle man coverage as a pro, but he's above average as a zone defender. He has 3-down talent and coverage value, but his limitations create small margins for error and large obstacles to overcome. 40-yard dash, 4.82, which is the worst rating of any linebacker. 16 linebackers were tested, 16 out of 16. Broad jump, 9.2. That's dead last of all linebackers tested, 15 out of 15. Now somehow he won the 3-cone drill. He was best 3-cone guy in the entire group. Only 7 linebackers ran it, but he was number 1, Mark.
Now, if you just grabbed randomly a bunch of dudes off the street and said, we're going to do these various athletic tests, and one was the 40-yard dash and one was the 3-cone drill, you would think that there would be some
similarities there.
Yeah. I know it's not running in a straight line, but there's quickness involved. And if you're fast, you're usually quick and vice versa. That's kind of strange.
By the way, I don't relish any of these numbers, but just purely as a common guy's analysis, I find it fascinating. It's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Because all year we've talked about this past year, we talked about how underwhelming Iowa was on defense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it seems like the sum of their parts are less than the individuals, the pieces. And I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I think this is all going to bear itself out in the draft. I don't think NFL teams are stupid. I think scouts are very smart. These guys were invited to the combine for a reason. I'll acknowledge that. But I have been saying for the last couple of months, I think they may have close to a record number of guys drafted. I don't know. And if they're all drafted 6th, 7th round, maybe they get a bunch of Hawkeyes drafted late in the draft. How do you weigh that? Like, okay, decent talent there, but nobody great. I mean, Caleb Johnson's a great college running back. Nobody's going to deny that. At least this past year he was. But those numbers, look what Ashton Genty did. I mean, it's apples to oranges to some extent. By the way, Connor Colby, prospect grade 5.65, another candidate for bottom of roster or practice squad. 4-year starter who can play guard in a primarily move-oriented rushing attack. Listen to this. This is indicting, Mark. Listen to this description. Colby started 50 games at Iowa, was well-versed in the inside-outside zone attack. He reads defensive movements and adjusts his blocks accordingly. He connects with strong hands, looks to finish lateral engagements, does not have the pad level to play strength to deal with power across from him. His pass protection is troubling. His pass protection is troubling with areas of concern that might not be correctable. That is very strong language from a draft analyst.
You know what this causes me to want to do? It's too time consuming, but to say, okay, what were the most successful offensive plays against the Iowa defense this year? And just watch Jay Higgins on every play, every running play that gashed them, et cetera, et cetera. Then take every drop back during Connor Colby's 50 games at Iowa, every drop back, and watch, just isolate on him and see.
But what's interesting, we said that all year, Mark. We were like, man, this offensive line has really come a long way, but man, they're still giving up a lot of pressure to Cade and Brendan. I mean, they did. This is supposed to be their best. He and Logan Jones were their two best. I think that both guys were considered to be better offensive linemen over playing different positions than Mason Richmond, but those were your top 3. And Connor Colby considered to be the best NFL prospect, and he was just rated as having pass protection that is troubling. So anyways, and that's, I believe, it. So thank you, Tyler Tashman, for those. I appreciate him compiling all that. I just thought we could talk about that. I'm sure we'll end up talking about it again as we get closer to the draft. But I'm going to run. I guess I'll run through those probably on my channel and just do the same thing we just did. And I don't know. I react to it, I guess. But yeah, it would be an interesting exercise to pull up some of those analyses from past seasons, past draft classes from Iowa players, and see if, was George Kittle in those, with those same descriptors, and TJ Hawkinson and Josie Jewell, who's turned into a solid NFL player. Christian Kirksey. I mean, that's what's crazy too about this, Mark. We're talking guys at positions that historically have performed very well in the league. Okay. This isn't an Iowa quarterback that, he started to emerge, but he still didn't test well at the combine. No, these are tight ends, linebackers, cornerbacks, offensive linemen, and defensive linemen that are testing, looks to be poorly. Hey, their highest rated combine guy was a running back. When's the last time we've said that? I don't know what Sean Green did at the 09 combine, but it's interesting.
It is. I'm interested in, again, that grading scale must mean something, or somebody at some point would pitch it, I would hope.
Or at least pitch it for, you can't pitch it just for Iowa, I guess, but it's, maybe they do. Maybe for Iowa, it's not as important, but I can't.
Just like recruiting.
Yeah, just to some extent, right? Yeah. That's why, you can look at this two sides of the card, right? On one side, you're like, okay, maybe they weren't as talented as we thought they were. That's concerning. But who cares? Like, for the players, I want what's best for the guys, would get drafted and have success, all that. But doesn't that maybe make us a little more optimistic about next year? Because maybe they're not losing as much, or is it troubling that those guys were so much better than the guys below them? I don't know how you're. I do know this. They brought in two interior guys on the defensive side. Bryce Hawthorne's looked really good so far, is what I've been told. They brought in Jonah Pace from Central Michigan. They have not brought in a linebacker. By the way, Nick Jackson was snubbed. He was a guy that I would have expected to end up at the combine. Did not get an invite, so that's notable. But corner is an intriguing one because they bring a lot of guys back, a couple of young prospects that I think could develop into immediate starters. A guy like Jalen Watson's one guy, example there. And then Quinn Schulte didn't get invited to the combine, but he never was going to. I think he was a really good college player, but was just never going to test well. Maybe he'll get a camp invite somewhere, but you do bring back Xavier Wampa. You bring back a couple of guys on the outside of that defensive line. And I don't think anybody's going to deny, though, that Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson were really good in college. I do wonder, I think, and this is not a personal attack, I've gotten backlash because I've said some things about certain people that people think is personal. This is not a personal attack. I think Y.A. Black was a little overrated, but I'm no scout. I'm no analyst. He is a space clogger. I don't know how great of a football player he is. And what I read with Lance Zierlein, we'll see what the NFL thinks of him. But those combine numbers don't surprise me from that respect. But at the same time, throughout all this, I've been thinking, well, maybe I'm just not seeing things right. When I watch Y.A. Black play, I'm not impressed. I'm just not. He's huge. He is a mammoth, Mark. He is an absolute mammoth. I've stood next to him. He's one of the biggest guys I've ever stood next to in an Iowa Hawkeye uniform. I wondered if he was a little overrated. Jamari, I don't think, showed many chinks this year, but part of the knock against him is his age, as is the case with Sebastian Castro. I'm surprised Castro tested out as poorly as he did. Now, he's a big hitter and a hard worker. So those guys are going to get chances. I'm sure Sebastian Castro will be drafted somewhere. And even, again, most of these guys, it's not like the NBA. If you don't get drafted, you still got a chance to work yourself into a camp. Yes, it's harder to do and earn a spot, but they'll still get at least probably close to 10 guys in camps, between guys that get drafted and the guys that get unsigned or go unsigned as free agents. So interesting stuff. I have not really followed the combine well enough to be some sort of authority, but I just thought those results were intriguing.
Well, we went into the season, of course, looking at the linebacking in particular, and also the secondary as top 3 to 5 units in the country and we were not alone in that. That was pretty much the consensus across the board from the experts, is that this is one of the best, maybe the best linebacking unit, at least from the standpoint of productivity coming back. Probably, if that's the measurement, the best linebacking unit in the country. I remember when we had the conversation, I threw the athleticism component into it and said I would back them off a little bit because of that. And maybe that's played out with the invite not coming to Nick Jackson and Jay Higgins not testing well. But then the secondary, again, a top 3 to 5 unit in the country, and the defensive line not being elite, maybe, but being very good. And that this defense, from looking at the productivity and the rankings of this defense and how dominant they've been prior to 2024. And then you take the offensive upgrade where they actually took pressure off the defense because they actually had a pulse this year, and that the defense regressed as much as it did with the veteran leadership and productivity coming back, minus Cooper DeJean. And who else did they lose off that 23 defense? Anyone else significant?
23. Was Riley Moss was
the year before?
Moss? No, I think Moss was.
Oh, he was.
I think he was 23, wasn't he?
So yeah, so 2 significant players, of course, and maybe.
I don't know.
But anyway, regardless, that they didn't lose much, that we were expecting dominant defense this year.
Yeah. But again, based on the performance on the field throughout much of this past season, those numbers shouldn't surprise us.
Yeah.
It's almost like we thought that the performance had to be the outlier. The amount. I mean, it would just, and I don't know what it means. I don't know what it means. Big picture doesn't mean anything. We'll see. Let's wait for the draft to play out. And, they could always add somebody else in the portal. When that spring cycle, that window opens, but they're also likely to lose a player or two at a minimum once some of these battles play out in the spring.
And a few things work against Y.A. Black and Jay Higgins as well, and that's just the way the game has moved. And that's a Jay Higgins in 1995 is transferable more to the NFL because it's a 60-40 run versus pass versus a maybe 35-65 flip, to where, we can't have this guy, not that he's not valuable and can't be inserted at times, but you just don't know when teams are passing versus running, and to put him out on the field where the speed is an issue. And then with Y.A. Black, it's just simply there's not as much play inside the tackles as there once were. And those guys have to get to the outside and make plays.
Yeah. Real quick, can I ask you just your thoughts on I totally drew a blank. I was going to ask you about NFL storyline. Well, while I'm doing this, what'd you have for dinner?
I didn't have anything for dinner because you know what?
6:30 out there. What are you doing? Oh, are you fasting?
We're on a juice cleanse for 3 days.
How about that?
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday until Thursday morning. Nothing but this particular juice.
I was thinking Big Ten running back. Saquon Barkley, now the NFL's top paid running back.
Okay.
I think he deserves it. Also, Devontae Adams was released by the Jets.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley's had an interesting career, considering that he was just a very unique running back at Penn State and came into the league. Much expected of him. The organization was headed in the wrong direction once he got there. Didn't have the run blocking, had injuries, had kind of a disappointing career up until this year, and then all of a sudden, bam.
Yeah.
Disappointing might be overstated. Did not have a great start to his career.
Real quick, do punters get tested at the combine?
Yes, they do have a kicking component,
but they don't run the
40 days. I don't believe so.
So Pat McAfee never ran the 40?
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right. I just was curious. I'm curious I don't remember if Tory Taylor. I'm assuming Tory Taylor did test at the combine, but
I saw some video of the place kicker, so I would assume they do that same thing with the punters. Actually, I would think that the punting would be more important to show from various distances.
by the way, I'm trying to find. I see somebody commenting in the chat about some of Iowa State's numbers. I have not compared Iowa's numbers to Iowa State's. Chev Yoda says Cooper DeJean was a 6.36. So 6.36 was higher, would have been substantially higher than anybody. I mean, Caleb Johnson's a 6.23, so he'd be the closest. But
6.36 is what, Super Bowl champion?
Eventually be a plus starter. 6.36. Closer to being a good starter within 2 years than, Caleb's rating. But what is this? What is Mikey Mike in the chat saying? What is this question?
Oh, who knows? What do we have?
Bottom comment. You're going to like this one.
How long are Corey's arms? 6 feet long?
6 feet long. Do my arms look really long right now?
Wingspan out on the perimeter? Is that your...
Yeah, it's called... I've been working at my combine skills. They take measurements at the combine as well.
Yeah, it's impressive. It didn't really stand out to me.
If you're a offensive tackle, you got to have long arms. You got to be able to reach, right? So
keep the defender away from you. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. See, I have really short arms.
Yeah, I love it.
All right. What people are noticing during our show.
Yeah.
Very good.
I had we won't go there. Anyways. All
right, folks. We do appreciate you being here. Corey, what's up next from the Hawkeye of the Storm?
Well, you're going to like this one. We've got women's basketball Big Ten tournament starting tomorrow. Hawkeyes did make the tournament, and they will be the 10 seed. They'll play Wisconsin. Winner of that game will play Michigan State. Winner of that game will play Ohio State, your Buckeyes. So I know you love it when I say that.
I've never seen the Lady Buckeyes play 1 minute of one game.
You're missing out
in my life.
Well, you're missing out. So, but that's tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m. Central Time, depending on when the other games finish on Peacock, and then we'll have live post-game coverage right here, over on my channel from the Hawkeye of the Storm. And then the men, they play Thursday down in Iowa City against the Spartans. So their season is basically over. They'd have to win these last 2 games to really give themselves a chance to make the Big Ten tournament. And even then, I don't know. I didn't even look at that.
They need to win 2 games and get some help to get into the top 15.
I think so. The bottom of the Big Ten and the women's side is a lot worse than the bottom of the Big Ten, the men's side. The conference is better on the women's side than the men's, but the bottom in the women's is really bad. Mark, listen to this. On the women's side, listen to you got 5 teams at the bottom of the Big Ten, one of which made the conference tournament. 5 teams at the bottom of the Big Ten that have, with 18 conference games played, 4 losses or less. Or 4 wins or less. 4. All right. Now, the men do play a couple more. They play 20 games. But you look at the Big Ten men, you've got the bottom 4 teams, 6 wins, 5 wins, 4 wins. So your answer to your question is, if the men were playing on the women's side as far as record, they'd easily be in. They're 6-12. So if they get if they get to 8-12, they can probably avoid it.
I'll say it this way, Corey. If the men's were playing in the women's league, they would definitely be in the conference tournament.
No, you really you think? Thanks, Mark.
A lot of people don't agree with me.
Who doesn't? Who's arguing with that?
That's just not a great statement to make in these days and times.
John McEnroe fought that out one time on CBS News. So
he did.
Just let him take care of it.
I recall that. I've seen that on many clips.
Yeah. Well, he tells it like it is, and he was a great tennis player, and I love him as an analyst. Sometimes he didn't have the most tact in the world, but he's a tennis legend. So I got
We've talked
respect.
a little bit tennis, and I don't think Johnny Mack came up, but I loved McEnroe too. But I was a Connors guy.
Well, those guys
So,
had their bouts.
oh yeah, they had their bouts, and but then I grew to appreciate McEnroe later, near the end of his career, when he wasn't playing Connors, and then just became. I used to watch a lot of tennis. A great analyst, great
Yeah.
analyst.
So I'll real quick before we leave, D. Rollison, thank you, says I'll buy you a juicer. Who's he buying a juicer to?
For $10 because I'm juicing because I
Oh, there you go.
$10 buys a juicer.
Well, YouTube takes 30%, so it's a $7 juicer. But anyways, let me give you, before we can't do Connors or McEnroe, I'll give you 5 tennis players, and you tell me the first thing that comes to your mind when I tell you their names.
Okay.
I'll give you an easy one. Jim Courier.
He's got red hair.
I knew you were going to say that. He was one of the.
He was like a grinder. He wasn't super talented, right?
He was also yes, and he was also one of the few Americans that was really good on clay.
Okay.
Right? Didn't he win a couple of French Opens, I believe?
Yeah.
Let's see. Can I give you a harder one? I'm thinking old. Now I'm like, I can't go.
You're going to give me people I don't remember, maybe.
I can't predate. I was going to say like Pat Cash or something. I can't predate Mark.
Pat Cash.
Yeah, that's a bad example.
I remember Pat Cash. I think he played a lot of Davis Cup.
Goran Ivanisevic.
Oh, man. He could serve. His serve was
good. And I believe he played on the senior tour for a long time and still had a big serve.
So we're talking late 90s with Ivanisevic. Yeah.
Yep. Here's another one stretch into the early 2000s. Mark Philippoussis.
Sure.
Okay.
Obviously, the name stands out.
Another big serve. Let's see. I got to give you 2 more before we go here.
We're going to clip this off and post it.
Post it on the tennis at the Voice of College Football channel. Let's see. I was going to give you a more modern guy, but here's a interesting one. Todd Martin. Remember Todd Martin?
Vaguely.
Okay. American, 90s, early 2000s.
Oh, yeah.
Served and volleyed a lot. I think he played into maybe the 2005 to 6 range.
Okay. Well, then I remember the name, but I can't picture him.
Pat Rafter is another great one.
Pat Rafter.
Yeah, Patrick Rafter. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go, like I say, I could go later and give you, Rod Laver and Arthur Ashe and Roscoe Tanner and Bjorn Borg and Boris Becker. Obviously, those are easy ones. I can't give you those.
Yvonne Lendl,
absolutely.
Now, if you read off the top 10 players on the circuit today, I don't know that I would know any of them.
I wouldn't know all of them. I mean, I could probably give you half or more, but ever since Andy Roddick retired, and by the way, I got a lot of respect for Jimmy Connors because he helped Andy through a pretty tough time during his career, and so I have respect for Jimmy for that reason. I don't think Jimmy's probably the friendliest guy in the world, but
I loved Connors.
Yeah, he's a fighter. That you probably love that U.S. Open, right? The comeback.
Absolutely, that was so fun. Staying up till 2 a.m. watching Connors.
Go at 46-year-old for whatever he was going at the umpire.
yeah, made it to the semis that year. That was remarkable. And he would intentionally just sandbag a set. Not using the right term, but he would, if he got down 2-love, he knew I need to save my energy. He would just blow sets 6-love because I got to get to the next set.
Well, here's the other thing. Everybody thinks of John McEnroe as having a bad temper, but Jimmy was right up there with John.
Yeah.
It was just they were just different people.
Yeah.
And so anyways.
Good stuff. All right, Corey, have a great next show, which I'm completely forgetting when that's going to be.
Tomorrow night. We'll have live post-game coverage with Shane Alexander after Iowa, Wisconsin. And then we'll just keep it's winter go home. And we'll keep having post games every night as long as the women keep winning, and they're going to make the big dance regardless. So we'll have Selection Sunday coverage in some way, shape, or form as well.
All right, folks, lock it in here as well. Next Tuesday, we'll be back with Corey. So bring a friend or two or 50 with you, and we'll see you next Tuesday.